My name's Greg Poole, and I'm here today to talk about ADACS. I spoke to this crowd last year about ADACS, and um, I don't know how many people were able to be there. So I didn't want to give the same talk again. I thought, particularly with the decadal planning that's coming up in the community, I thought, well, maybe an interesting theme would be to talk a little bit more strategically about computing in our community and where I see it going and the kind of changes that I think that are starting to happen in terms of support for computing for researchers, both in Australia and internationally. So if I were there, and sorry, I'm not able to be there, both because I love to hang out with everybody and talk science. I don't get to do that nearly as often as I'd like anymore. But also, I would at this point probably ask the crowd, how many of you write software and spend a lot of energy writing software as part of your research? And I expect a lot of people would put their hands up. I'd probably also ask, do you feel like you get enough support in that effort? And I would expect a lot of people would say no. It's kind of a well-known problem in research, not just in Australia, in astronomy, and not just in Australia, but throughout research internationally, that researchers more and more these days are being asked to write software that's increasingly complex and difficult to manage, and it's becoming a burden that is impacting people's careers. And it's very clear now that it's really just not a cost-effective model. So I thought I would just sort of highlight a couple of things that have come out of the federal government in Australia in the last couple of years that are really signaling that there is a change coming, and the kind of support you guys are needing with this effort is coming. And I just wanted to kind of encourage everybody to kickstart a conversation about how our habits and our culture around computing need to change in this community to kind of be ready for the changes that are coming. So, what's going on there? Okay. So I would imagine a lot of people aren't aware of a couple of documents I'm going to highlight here. Maybe some senior members amongst us will be, but so in 2021, the Department of Education wrote or published a document called the National Research Infrastructure Roadmap. And in this document, they really highlighted these problems that I'm talking about here. So that research, and I've highlighted a sentence here in a phrase here that I've clipped out of the document. So researchers no longer have sufficient expertise in computational data management and analysis techniques to keep up with the rapid advances in computing technologies. So it's a pretty dry document. I wouldn't necessarily encourage you all to read it, but you should be familiar with it, because it is sort of clear that the department, and this was, a document that was fostered and written under the previous government, and this is thinking that is continuing under the current government. So it's clear that there is a shift in the thinking here. There's an awareness amongst our funding bodies that something needs to give here. In this document, they also make 8 recommendations. They're quite dry. They're a bit non-specific, but there's 3 that I highlight here that really, kind of are relevant to our community. And that is, they signal that we need to start providing continuity and long-term funding to national research infrastructure in this country. We need a more integrated system where, they're recognizing the fact that research is increasingly becoming interdisciplinary and skills are needed from various areas and bodies, and we need a way to start coordinating research across domain boundaries and across expertise boundaries in the country. And we also need to improve industry engagement with NRI. I highlight this one because this is an interesting way by which the astronomy community here in this country can leverage funding from the federal government. So we are very skilled at scientific computing in this community, and we are getting organized around this. And it has allowed us to reach out, and software is a great way by which to drive industry engagement for our community. So, and there is this ongoing push for industry engagement with research in this country. So it is increasingly going to be an important way that our community establishes relevance with the federal government. So the Department of Education, and for those that don't know, the Department of Education manages research funding in this country. They have this program, NCRIS, and through NCRIS, they fund this body called the ARDC. The ARDC published a document after that previous document I was looking at there, that was the following year, called the National Agenda for Research Software. And this was a really interesting document. They really consulted heavily with the community. This man, Tom Honeyman, I think was very skilled in the way he sort of conducted that outreach, and they had all these town hall meetings. And I think they were really well run. And they've compiled this document that I think is pretty short, concise, and pretty accurate in its assessment of what needs to be done. So he talks about how research software needs to be recognized as a first-class output of research. There's a lot of software that gets written. There's a lot of energy that goes into it. It is an important part of a lot of publications. We need to start treating it as a research output. And we need to recognize and retain the creators and maintainers of software, and we need to start finding ways that they can be supported and their career paths fostered. So this is all stuff that probably everybody is aware of, but it's interesting to see that the government is actually starting to take notice and trying to bend their ways. So they identify 3 challenges in this document, and they summarize it this way: that the creators of analysis code need to start making their practices more transparent, so that the code is visible. That code that contributes to publications needs to be visible. We need to start people who are prototyping code, they need to start being encouraged to do so a little more professionally, so that the quality of the software is better, so that it can grow into established research infrastructure, and the maintainers of this infrastructure need to be supported. So summarized here. So this isn't just happening in Australia. This is kind of a movement that's starting to happen internationally, that communities are starting to realize that they need to start getting strategic about the way software is handled and research software is handled. I highlight 3 here in the UK, in Canada, and the Netherlands. There's many, many others. But here in Australia, these attempts have historically mostly been managed through, coordinated at a state or an institutional level. Like Melbourne Uni's got MDAP, which kind of supports Melbourne Uni astronomers. Up in Queensland, they got QCIF, which supports Queensland researchers. And so, it's a pretty ad hoc, and it's clear now that the government wants to start getting kind of coordinated at a national level around this. Sorry, I just lost my stopwatch there. Okay, so enter my group here, ADACS. So we've actually been trying to do this now, and by we, I mean the Australian astronomy community. We've been actively working towards this sort of model for 7 years now. And the federal government is starting to realize that we are showing leadership in this area, and it is starting to pay dividends. They're really paying attention to us in these discussions. They're consulting us. It's a real opportunity for our community to show some leadership nationally here. So for those that aren't familiar with ADACS, it's astronomy-focused training, support, and expertise. It's a group that provides astronomy-focused training, support, and expertise. And the idea here is to maximize the scientific return on investments in computing in Australia. We've got sort of 3 service components. One is we provide training, and those face-to-face workshops, webinars, and internships. We help support the All-Star Supercomputer, which is a compute cluster at Swinburne that every single Australian astronomer is entitled to an account on. If you don't have one, you should. It's basically a rubber stamp, and you get 10 terabytes of disk space, and you've got quite a capable mid-tier supercomputer that you can just run with. We also help support the ADACS Merit Allocation Program, which I'll speak very briefly about in a moment. And we help the ASTOC Supercomputing Time Allocation Committee. There's 3 nodes, one based at Swinburne, one at Curtin, and one at Macquarie. And it's all funded by AAL via support they get through NCRIS. So just real quickly, like, we're a very capable group. We do a lot of different things. We tend to hire for breadth of expertise. There's a list of capabilities there. It's not complete, but it's just to give you a sense that we can do a lot of things and we can probably help you with the problems that you've got. We've got, we do a lot of web development. We've got skilled user-centered design and user UX professionals within the group. So we're making sure that we're not just knocking out crappy things. We want to make sure that everything we do is to a professional standard, as well as trained project management professionals. Our flagship program is this ADACS Merit Allocation Program, through which you can apply, much like you would to for telescope time or computing time, for the time of our developers. You lodge an expression of interest, and then we consult with you. We help develop a proposal with you and figure out how much resources are needed, and then you lodge is basically sort of a 3-page PDF level of effort. To give you a sense of the kind of projects we do, here's a pie chart broken down by the type of project. We do, mobile projects. We do we refactor code, like we're taking a big EOR code that was written in IDL and we're refactoring it into Python, for instance. About 35% of the projects are optimization projects. About 25% of the projects are web projects. That kind of took us by surprise when we started ADACS, but it kind of makes sense that, astronomers have trouble we're kind of confident enough with scientific computing, but web development is such a different toolkit that a lot of astronomers have great ideas for projects that they would like to see on the web, but they totally lack the expertise to do that effort. So we do a fair bit of web development. And then 30% are a wide assortment of things. Mobile apps, for instance. I've highlighted DevOps here. So that's like projects where people come to us, they've got a code base that's being used by a whole group or by a lot of people, but it's not pip installable, and they don't really have automated testing, and there's documentation in the code, but they don't know how to get read the docs working. So we can, here's an example by a project by Avi Vajpayee, who was at Monash at the time and a graduate student. And he came to us with what was, in his words, a poorly developed code base, and we professionalized it so that it was pip installable and, publish documents and read the docs and all that sort of stuff.
Greg, can you wrap up in the next minute?
Yes, I can. So yeah, we support sort of small and long-term projects, and we do training as well. And this is for everybody. So stay tuned for an email from the ASA Exploder in the next week or so. We've now got a simple web form through which you can engage with us. And then I just have one last slide where I just want to put out the ideas that I was ultimately trying to get to with this talk. And that is kind of a bit of a call to action here. So supervisors, please start treating proper development practices as an investment. Start helping your graduate students to get the skills they need early. Don't treat it as an expense. If you do it early, it will pay dividends over time. And you need to start understanding the requisite knowledge yourself. You need to start understanding what it is that your graduate students need to know. Please don't think of these services as the postdoc you wish you had. These people have skills that you don't have and have troubles even imagining sometimes, and they don't have skills that you might take for granted. And start thinking strategically now, okay? We've got to start getting away from this idea that we're writing all the code for our research. We've got to start thinking that there are these opportunities now to start collaborating with skilled groups and start acting strategically, but you got to be thinking broadly and long-term and strategically in sort of doing this. So yeah, I'll wrap up there and I'll take any questions if there's time.